Alex, do you play chess?
Not generally. I know how, but I just never really play. So
We Tom and
I
I
can't
used
remember
the
how to castle.
Yeah.
I can't remember how to do that for the life of me. But
do you castle, Tom?
Oh yeah, that's like I feel like very sophisticated when I castle. I move everything out of the way, and then I move. What is it? It's your it's your rook and the king, right? You
So
just switch them,
your king slides to the side of the rook all the way up to it,
right?
and then the rook hops the king.
Right, right.
Um, Evidently, you're supposed to do it like the earlier the better, has the best outcomes. But some people wait in order to like throw off their opponent because if by the time mid game rolls around, you already have a strategy of attack, and if
Yeah,
you completely move the king, it changes everything.
right. Welcome to episode 63. This week we were talking about why Disney is struggling at the box office, Apple's App Store issues, and we have more lightning round questions at the end. Disney's new movie Strange World became the second consecutive Disney animated movie to bomb at the box office, collecting a measly $18.6 million since opening last Wednesday. Disney also had a poor results with the movie Lightyear that released this summer. This led the company's board of directors to fire CEO Bob Chapek and bring Bob Iger back, who was the previous CEO before Bob Chapek was, for a 2-year term. Do you think Disney's issues are caused by logistical reasons, or are poor sales a result of the company's decision to make woke content?
so I think it's probably a combination with this movie. Number one, I'm not necessarily in the market for family friendly movies quite yet from Disney, but I didn't see any advertising at all for this movie. I had never heard of this movie until I started to hear about it released to very poor numbers. So, I'm not going out of my way to look up advertisements for Disney films, but things, other Disney movies, even Lightyear, I had heard about long before it actually came out. This one, I had never heard anything. So I think it was probably poor marketing. Um, you can also look at the woke stuff, the diversity and inclusion, LGBT stuff as part of it. Increasingly, Hollywood has become dependent on movies doing well in foreign markets, particularly China, but they don't particularly care for, LGBT content in particular. And the movie was banned in China, as far as I know, anyways. So if you get $0 and 0 cents from a market you were previously getting a few hundred million from, which a few years ago they were getting a few $100 million of film out of the Chinese market for their animated features, and all of a sudden you're getting zero, and you're not marketing the movie particularly well to American audiences, and the ones who are paying attention, with half or more of them not interested in seeing the movie at all because you've gone out of your way to tell people that it's the first openly gay lead or whatever the deal was with the main character of this movie, and you don't know anything else about the movie. I'm not really surprised that it does poorly. Lightyear was also in China, by the way, because of LGBT content. So, that's probably a few $100 million for each movie off the table immediately. So it doesn't seem very smart to me to make movies that feature that kind of content that are instantly going to get banned in a market that you've increasingly come to rely on. But I think it's probably a combination of poor marketing plus plus LGBT stuff in the foreign markets leading it to be banned.
I agree with that. I don't think the two reasons are mutually exclusive. I think it's a combination of both poor marketing and some wokeness. But I think the lion's share, in my opinion, lies with Disney going too far woke. I think that probably is the biggest reason. Disney stock has been dropping like a hot knife through butter, and that's probably an indicator that society is not ready for that level of wokeness yet. I don't know. Maybe it will someday. Maybe it will never be. But the thing about woke capitalism is it plays second fiddle to free market capitalism, where market participants are driven mostly by the money. And the only thing worse than bad press for a company is a bad quarterly statement. So it's kind of ironic because Disney was trying to leverage woke capitalism to advance their position in the economy. But after they started losing money, they fired their leader and they started to change things up. If they really stood behind their political beliefs, they wouldn't be influenced by poor economic performance. Now, I do respect their effort, though. The beautiful thing about this country is you can try new things, you can innovate, you can improve upon old things, but the markets will always be there to reward or punish that behavior. But like I said, society doesn't demand that level of wokeness that Disney is providing. And until society does demand that, I think more companies are going to see Disney as the canary in the coal mine, and they're probably going to tone down their rhetoric so they don't suffer financially too.
Disney has been the master at knowing exactly what it is that children want. For 3 generations, they know that children like chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry ice cream. I've never seen a 5-year-old say, Mom, let's go to Baskins and Robbins so I can have pistachio ambrosia or lemon chiffon. They essentially want the basics. And for generations, Disney has delivered exactly what a 5-year-old would want. Over the last few years, Disney's employees have populated to the point where they prefer giving the market Tutti Frutti ice cream when the kids still want chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. And even more importantly is the parents don't want their kids getting Tutti Frutti ice cream. So they went to a couple of movies and they thought they were getting chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. And they got chocolate and vanilla and strawberry tainted with Tutti Frutti. And the kids go, I don't really like that. I don't want to do that. And then pretty soon it's on every other alternative news site that Disney is going to start pushing Tutti Frutti ice cream, even though the marketplace wants chocolate, vanilla, and strawberry. I think it was a really bad decision under the leadership of Bob Chapek to buckle to the desires of his employees at the demise of the company. Because when you stop giving the things that made you successful to the public and you start mandating what the public's going to like, the public's going to turn on you. And that's exactly what has happened to Disney. And we see their stock price going in that direction.
Yeah. So let's see. Strange World, opening weekend, it grossed 18.6 million. I think they needed like 30 to 40 to break even. But then this summer, Lightyear, I think made like between 50 and 80 million opening weekend. At the same time, you had Maverick that came out. It grossed 134 million. And then the new Jurassic Park movie grossed 145 million. So clearly people wanted to see Maverick and Jurassic Park over what Disney's releasing. And there's been all kinds of explanations for this. The biggest one that I hear from like the Wall Street Journal and other places is that Bob Chapek is a bad manager. And like some of the management issues that they had is it used to be under Bob Iger that each creative department, so the director of Lucasfilms, the director of Pixar, whatever divisions that they have, they basically self-manage their own division, and they decide on like how they're going to distribute the content, whether they want to do a theatrical release or if they want to just stream it on Disney. And they make all those decisions, and then they make all the creative decisions themselves. And I guess under Chapek, you had to basically, Bob Chapek basically had to stamp his approval on it. Whereas Bob Iger was just like, hey, I'm going to salute you with both hands. Just send me an email so I know what you're doing. But ultimately, it's your guys' baby. And under Iger, they did make some pretty good content. Like Encanto was a pretty big one. And before that, they had Moana. I've seen both of those repeatedly because I have kids that are in the age where they like watching it. And the thing that I liked about Disney is that they spend a lot of time on their story. So it's actually a good story. So when I'm forced to watch this with my kids, and I do watch this stuff because I don't want surprise themes cropping up like Lightyear had, and supposedly The Strange World, even though, like Alex, I've seen nothing about it. So I actually have to watch these movies with my kids so we can have conversations about it, and I'm not just taken, and just surprised by it. But the thing I appreciate about it is that there's actually a pretty decent story, and they put a lot of effort into the story and developing it. And most of these movies I thought were better than Maverick and Jurassic World, which I thought were just basically a copy and paste of previous films. But so I think there is something to say about Chapek's management has been hindering it, and then also is that you have like your job as a company is to give people what they want. And if they don't want it, they're going to stop buying that. So I think that's evident by these last two movie sales. You're under 18.6 million is pretty low compared to some of these other movies, and clearly people are either, and it's not that they just don't really like that. I think they're looking at the previews and being like, I'm going to pass on this and going somewhere else, as evident by Jurassic Park and Maverick. So, so I think there's definitely something to say that Disney needs to start listening to its consumers and finding out what they want, because clearly what they're giving is nothing that they want to see.
Well, you mentioned streaming, and that was the other thing that I had in my notes. Disney has to be careful, I think, that they don't cannibalize their own business. And that's a relatively new issue for Disney, that normally everything gets released in the theaters, and then 6 months or however long later it comes out on DVD or Blu-ray or whatever streaming service they had a deal with. But now, if you're a family of four and you're looking at $10 to $15 a movie ticket plus snacks and drinks and popcorn and all that other stuff, I mean, you're looking at a decent chunk of change to take your two kids, mom and dad, to the movies. But if 90 days from now, the same movie is going to be on Disney Plus, and you already have Disney Plus, so your kids can watch everything all the time anyways, why would you bother going to the movie theater? So I think there's probably a part of that that's going to be something Disney's going to have to look at, maybe delaying their releases or something. Other streaming services that have had deals with big distributors have noticed that there's some cannibalization going on, and so they've revised their streaming deals. I know it was a big deal for Warner Brothers movies, but that was during the pandemic era, and there wasn't a whole lot of choice there. And they've kind of backed away from that since then because they don't want to cannibalize their own business.
When Drew and Kara, his sister, were young, right around Thanksgiving, I'd be getting a phone call from my mom, and she's saying, well, what do Drew and Kara want for Christmas? And I might say, well, Drew says he wants some Aladdin underwear, or his sister might want some Pocahontas pajamas. And in addition to getting the Pocahontas pajamas and the Aladdin underwear, there'd be action figures and doll houses and lunch boxes. And Grandma and Grandpa would be buying all this Disney stuff because in Grandma's mind, she heard Aladdin and Pocahontas, and that stuff was everywhere. My peer group now are grandparents, and I can't imagine any of my peer group going and buying Strange World stuff for their grandkids, or going and saying, hey kid, can I take my grandkids out to go see Strange World? It's just not happening. In fact, it's the exact opposite. In my peer group, there are lots and lots of grandparents out there who are saying, over my dead body, am I going to take my kid to Disney World or Disneyland, or buy them, Disney memorabilia? It's that bad in my social circles anyway.
They also dumped $72 billion into I think the buying some Fox content. That didn't hurt. That didn't help either. So the last earnings call was pretty ugly, and I guess Bob Chapek was reportedly too casual about it. He was like, investors reportedly didn't like his tone. He's like, yeah, we lost, spent, had a gross, a net loss of like $72 billion. And he said it in kind of like an upbeat, casual tone, and everybody's just like, wait, say that again. How much?
But the writers for Disney, their creativity was allowed to proliferate. And for Bob Chapek, that was the important thing.
I think Bob Chapek, he didn't want their creativity. Like he wanted to stamp it himself, right? That's what Bob Iger was the one who is supposedly let creatives create, I guess.
Yeah, and everybody's still buying Frozen stuff, which was an Iger property. So
yeah,
great, yeah.
Okay, all right. Let's move on. So Uh, renewed criticism of Apple's App Store has emerged as Elon Musk said that Apple threatened to remove the Twitter app as part of its app review moderation process. Additionally, Elon accused Apple of having an improper monopoly because it does not allow users to access third-party app stores, and it largely forces all apps on the platform to use Apple's own payment processing system, which charges a 30% tax on sales. Is Apple within its rights to manage its app store in this way?
I'm going to go ahead and say yes. I don't think this is too big of an issue. I don't think it's as big an issue as people are making of it. If Apple was the only big player in town, I might be a little more anti-Apple on this, but it isn't. It has the major competitor for operating systems in Android, which is open sourced by Google, so anybody can use it. And there are a half dozen major manufacturers building high-end flagship smartphones that are as good or better than the high-end iPhones. So it's really as simple as, if you don't like what Apple is doing, buy a different phone. There are a lot of other really great phones out there with solid operating systems on them. So do I like it? Not really. But I use an Android, so I get around this process. To get a little bit technical here, what Apple does is called a walled garden. You have to go through Apple to do anything, but on Android it's totally different. Android apps are what they call a .api file. You can sideload these easily. That means you can just download them from an alternative app store or directly from the developer's website and install them. You don't have to go through the Google Play Store. There are dozens of app stores that you can use if you feel like it. And then there's big manufacturers, like I said, Samsung. Google makes their own Pixel phone, which is a high-end flagship phone. As far as Elon Musk is concerned, I get that Twitter, not being in the Apple Store or having to pay a cut is a big deal. It's not like Apple is a small segment of the market. It's a big one. But again, my suggestion is, if you don't like what Apple does with its app store, just buy an Android phone. So, I don't think it's a big deal. Apple is fine to do this, especially since there is wide open competition.
I think that's easier to say for a non-Apple user, for someone to just switch products. I joke with my wife, I've been joking for years. There's two types of people in this world. There are those who are extremely devout consumers of Apple products, and then there's everyone else. For some reason, Apple users, they love their Apple, and like Samsung users are like, I could do this, I could do Google, I could do something else. So I think Apple does need to tread carefully here, because they could upset a huge part of their consumer base. Is Apple in the right doing this? Legally, I don't know. I can barely spell attorney, much less weigh in on the potential antitrust issues here. But in my opinion, I think Apple is totally within its rights to manage their app store the way they want. This is kind of like our discussion of Disney. I think that both these companies are just trying to position themselves better in the economy and make the most money. Right now, Apple thinks that partnering with Twitter might be bad for business, and Elon Musk thinks that Apple not partnering with Twitter is bad for business. It's not much different than whether a baker can refuse to make a cake for political or religious reasons. So the question is, who holds the trump card? Should Apple be forced to do business with everyone, or are they free to discriminate and then face the consequences? Personally, I like the idea of Apple being free to make its own decisions at its own peril. Either way, I think Twitter is probably in the losing position here. I think Twitter needs Apple more than Apple needs Twitter. However, like I said, I think Apple should tread very carefully, because one wrong move and they could have huge problems with their consumers.
When I was in Indochina in 2012, I was amazed at how much Samsung technologies were proliferating the cell phone market. Every train, every plane, every bus that I got on, people were using Samsung products. There were a few Apple products, but overwhelmingly it was Samsung. In the United States, I think it's kind of 50-50. I think I echo what Drew and Alex have said, is that Apple has every right to make really, really bad decisions if they choose. I think I disagree with Drew. I think Twitter does have a lot of clout, not necessarily financial clout, but I think they've got the public behind them. I think that there's this wave of citizens who are sick and tired of free speech being stifled by these large technology titans. And if Apple does in fact block Twitter, I suspect that there'll be a groundswell of public support for a new platform, which Schopenhauer talked about as being part of the creative destruction process. That the dynasty that Apple has enjoyed for decades could come crumbling down because they're so ideologically entwined in their worldviews. So yeah, let Apple go ahead and do whatever they want. You know, some of us might be frustrated for 6 or 9 months, but the marketplace will give the market exactly what it wants. And I think that the market wants free speech more than they want people blocking different apps from being brought to the marketplace.
I also think Elon Musk is probably the wrong guy to tout the monopoly flag, because as he tweets, I think Apple is a monopoly. The next comment that he has is, maybe I should just go start my own, thereby creating more competition, and then basically eliminating you'd have to look up the definition of monopoly, but I feel like if you have the talent and the resources to create your own platform and directly compete with Apple, then there's probably not, Apple probably does not have the monopoly that you're saying it does. So I think, as far as the monopoly poster boy, I think Elon's probably the wrong person for that. But I think he's right, is that, they do, if they're, as far as I can tell, Apple doesn't really have a reason to remove Twitter from their app store. I think they should be allowed to do it, but their content moderation process is what? I mean, supposedly Elon's trying to make it so that you can say whatever you want on Twitter, and there is some moderation. I mean, you can't just say whatever you can't say. I mean, if you say illegal things, or try and incite violence or something like that, they can reserve the right to kick you off. So I think but they're just trying to make it so nobody's going to censor it. If you say something bad about Joe Biden or Donald Trump, they're not going to kick you off for that. And as far as I can tell, Apple doesn't really have a strong reason to remove them from the App Store. So yeah, but like you guys, they should be able to make that decision. And if Elon wants to, he can start make his own platform, make his own phone, like the Tesla phone or whatever, and then you can always go to Google to do that. Even though if I was Elon, I don't know if I'd want to start yet another company. I mean, he's got Tesla, SpaceX, the satellite company. Now he's got Twitter and the Boring Company plus Neuralink. It's like, how much? I mean, I know he's a smart guy, but like at some point, it's like there's only so many hours in a day that you can devote to this. So I'd be worried about Elon's resources at this point if he's going to try and start, especially when Twitter, if ad revenue keeps going down, you could have a lot of issues there. So.
I think Apple is his biggest revenue source, isn't it? So if he loses Apple, then this $44 billion company he just bought might not have been such a great deal all along.
But what we're not discussing is that the new business that is going to come in that was never going to be there before. So you lose one source of revenue and you increase with another source of revenue. I stayed off Twitter for years. Because of their unwillingness to allow free speech. And I just recently went on with hundreds of thousands of other new Twitters. So it's I think what we're seeing is just a changing of the guard. So
there has been a lot of new advertisers on my Twitter feed. There's been more advertisements, and there's been like different companies on there. So that's a good point. All right, we should probably move on to the lightning round. We only got 5 minutes left. So I saw an article that says the co-host of Jeopardy, her name is Mayim Bialik, apparently takes naps while she's at work. Is this something that you would ever have you ever done this, or would you ever consider taking a nap during work hours?
I don't generally like taking naps, so no. If I was ever exhausted, I might do it on a lunch break. But in general, I don't care much for naps, so no.
No, probably not. Like Alex, if I did have a long lunch break and I knew there was no distractions or I had to be at my best at any given moment, yeah, maybe a 20-minute power nap if I absolutely needed it, but probably not.
I wouldn't have a problem with employees who took naps and just made up with extra productivity. I don't take naps at the office either, but I just want success. I don't really care one way or the other. Whatever gets the most productivity out of an associate, I'd prefer that.
When I was an undergraduate, it was big it was like trendy for professors that close the door and like take a nap in their office for like 20 minutes to an hour or something like that, or their lunch hour, because they'd all have their like sleeping bag rolled up under a couch in their office. But when I got to grad school, there was a guy there who was he studied exercise physiology, and his thing was like, you can either take a nap or you can work out. And by far, a 20-minute, 30-minute workout has far lasting, better lasting effects than like any nap would, because if you sleep too long, you could wake up groggy and just be less productive. Whereas if you go work out, you're revitalized and you're more focused, and there's a lot more benefits. So if you're tired, I would suggest working out. But all right, so we'll move on to the second one from a study found that humans may evolve to have deformed bodies. Specifically, it suggests that if humans continue to use like technology, like they're sitting at their computers all day, they're using their iPhones, they may develop a second eyelid from technology overuse, as well as like a hunchback and like a claw hand. I mean, do you think this will actually happen, or is this just hyperbole for clickbait reasons?
No, this is clickbait. To quote Mac from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, through God, all things are possible. So jot that down. I guess it's entirely possible this happens, but I would seriously. It's not really how evolutionary biology works at all. It looks like clickbait. It's like that one study that found what would human beings look like if they were evolved to survive a high-speed crash. Look up Graham if you want to know what another freakish humanoid would look like. So no, it's not going to happen.
If microevolution is real and finches can develop different beaks for cracking different types of nuts, sure, yeah, over millions or billions of years, maybe we'll develop a second eyelid, but I think that would only be for our benefit if we continue to do so.
It's not going to happen. It's clickbait.
Yeah, I'll put a picture up, but Mindy's pretty terrifying, but I don't think this is going to happen for millions of years. And plus, there's like exercises and stuff you can do to, counteract this.
I think looking at Mindy, it suggests why she's not going to pass her genetic material on to the next generation.
Yeah.
Wow. I'll have to make an editing decision about that comment. So, all right, so last question here is that a studyfind.org also put on a study that says Americans are engaging in something called revenge traveling, where they're basically purposely taking trips to get back at pandemic restrictions. Is that just complete nonsense? I mean, is anybody actually doing that?
I've never heard of it. I thought it was called pent-up travel demand, where you do all the traveling you were gonna do. Maybe people are trying to get travel in that they think may not be possible in coming years, but if anything's going on, that might be it.
I think it's nonsense. My first job was at Lula's Cafe, and I was a dishwasher, and they call my position a sanitation engineer. So I think it's just a matter of wording. I don't think people are gonna say, "Oh, I'm gonna travel to Isla Verde and go kite surfing just to stick it to COVID." I think it's just pent up demand, like Alex said.
No, it's just we got pent up demand and limited travel supply, and that's the problem.
Yeah, I agree. All right, that's it for episode 63. We'll see you again next week.